They say size isn't everything, but let me tell you a little story. When I lived in England, I used to think that Manchester and London were really far apart. My perception of distance back then had been governed, I suppose, by the British Road Atlas and deceitful geography teachers. It was only once I moved to America that I saw England for what it truly was. An influential but tiny island floating on the shoulders of the much larger European continent, a kind of salacious crumb to Europe's Jabba the Hutt. But there's a reason Europe is so big. It's an entire flipping continent. The United States, on the other hand, is just one country, and it boasts a total area of 3.8 million square miles, almost exactly the same as Europe. And while Europe is made up of major countries such as England, Germany and Lithuania, America is comprised of 50 states, one of which, California, has a GDP higher than Italy. America is massive, and to give you an idea of just how massive it is, I'm going to give you a rundown of 11 states that are actually bigger than the entire United Kingdom. That's right, the very same United Kingdom that is comprised of not one, not two, but 4 countries. But before we get going, please bear in mind that we're dealing with the total area and not just that of the land. In other words, water territories such as lakes, rivers and SeaWorld are all included in both the given area of the United Kingdom and all of the states. I've just realised that there isn't a SeaWorld in the United Kingdom, so that doesn't work. And so let's put an end to the suspense. Here are those 11 states that are bigger than the UK. Let me know in the comments below if your state made the list. In the meantime, strap in. This one is going to be big. Okay, to look at it, you're probably thinking that there's no way Michigan is larger than the UK, right? Well, this is where water territories play their part. Michigan is one of 2 states on this list with a stake in large bodies of water. We'll get to the other later. But Michigan lays partial claim to Lake Superior, Lake Huron, and Lake Michigan, the 2nd, 4th, and 5th largest lakes on the entire planet. And because of this, Michigan is equivalent to 1.03 UKs, which means the state is more or less the same size as our next entry. Now, contrary to popular belief, Wyoming is not a past progressive verb. No, it's an American state, of course, and at 1.03 UKs, it's a rather big one too. That said, it is home to a relatively small number of people. Whereas the UK houses about 64 million people, Wyoming is home to just 550,000. It's because of this that Wyoming is the 2nd least densely populated state in the Union. What's number 1, you ask? Oh, we'll get to that later. But first, over to Rick Steves for this travel report.
Way out on the west coast, beneath my home state of Washington, is Little Oregon, a tiny coastal state that is home to the adorable city of Portland. And oh my god, it is 1.04 UKs. What the f? That's right, because the state is essentially one giant and by all accounts beautiful rectangle, most of Oregon's residents don't actually live on the coast. In fact, some of them live nearer to the aforementioned Wyoming than they do to the Pacific. And if you ask me, they should all go and pay those lonely Wyomingites a visit. That didn't sound as creepy in my head. Full disclosure, the Centennial State of Colorado is actually the furthest west I've ever been. And I can tell you this for nothing. There is a boatload of land out there. Actually, boat is probably the wrong phrase. Poor phrasing. There's a lot of open land is what I'm saying. And so all the more surprising then that Colorado boasts the lowest number of light vehicles per every 1,000 people in the entire US. In fact, amazingly, Colorado, a staggering 1.11 UKs, is one of only 2 states for whom this statistic is actually lower than the UK national figure. The other is Nevada. Oh, Nevada. Home to Las Vegas, secret alien experiments, and legalized prostitution, and sometimes all 3 at once. I've just realized that does not work. That would be an awful, awful mess. But of course, Nevada is much more than all of those things, which is just as well because it's the 7th largest state in America and is equivalent to 1.17 UKs. That's like the UK plus Fiji with Bermuda thrown in for good luck. A sort of jazzed up alternate Bermuda Triangle, perhaps, which obviously brings us back to aliens, which brings us on to Arizona. Actually, Arizona isn't that friendly to aliens. But the first thing I think of when somebody mentions Arizona is a giant hole in the ground. And that's not an underhand description of Arizona itself. There is literally a giant crater in the middle of Arizona caused by a meteor collision 50,000 years ago, or aliens, probably aliens.
But this alien didn't intend to talk about the paranormal, but the staggering fact that Arizona is 1.21 UKs. Heck, the Grand Canyon also is longer than the distance between Liverpool and Brighton. And if that doesn't blow your mind, remember this. We still have 5 bigger states to come. The next of which is Arizona's neighbour to the east. Of course, New Mexico, the site of Project Quantum Leap, Breaking Bad, and Blimey O'Reilly the Roswell incident. What is going on? Are extraterrestrials just fond of the southwest climate or something? Perhaps they thought signs for Albuquerque said Alderaan. Good luck breaking that one to them. Either way, New Mexico is equal to 1.29 UKs, which is roughly the size of Poland. And if that weren't ludicrous enough, our next entry takes your Poland and raises you a Japan. Not literally, that would be like the film 2012 with John Cusack. Nobody wants that. Now, Japan has little, of course, to do with Montana's cultural makeup, but rather its size. And not only is this particular rocky state about the same size as Japan area-wise, but it's also larger than the nation of Germany. I'll let that sink in. Montana, a state of 1 million people, with a GDP of about $45,000, is more expansive than a nation whose economy is the 4th strongest on the planet. When you consider this fact, you really start to see just what a miserably small country the UK really is. Because when all's said and done, Montana is an enormous 1.56 UKs. Montana, you're massive and you need to be stopped. And I've got just the opponent. It has the 6th largest GDP in the world. Its population is roughly 8 times that of Scotland, and it would absolutely batter Hannah Montana over there, and the state of Montana. Such as its size, California is more or less the nation of Paraguay disguised as a giant sock. A sock that is equal to 1.74 UKs, a sock that doesn't have a matching sock, and a sock that hopefully gets washed more than once a week. Also on America's laundry list is the next entry, which, if you're really, really drunk, sort of resembles a pair of underpants. Now, while the sentence, Texas looks like a big pair of underpants, might not go down too well in, Texas, please be aware that I am an equal opportunity offender. For example, the UK looks like the Wicked Witch of the West riding a pig. And now that I've shown you that, I would go and wash those underpants immediately. But don't be too scared, Texas, because you are much bigger than the UK. In fact, you are... Wow, Texas, you are absurdly big, the biggest state in the Union. And the more I look at you on the map, the more I realise that you really shouldn't mess with Texas. Not at all, no sir. Unless, oh, Julie Andrews in a fridge, you're not the biggest state in the Union. Texas, consider yourself well and truly messed with. This is just mind-boggling. You're bigger than space. You're 7.05 UKs. Oh, Alaska, stop what you're doing and become a continent right now. What the... How... You ate all the pies, Alaska. You ate all the pies. Remember earlier when I said Michigan was one of 2 states on this list with a stake in large bodies of water? Well, you're looking at the other one. Well, you're not looking at it, you're reading the word Alaska. But this behemoth is 13% water. But hold on, Texas. Hold on. Because before you get Napoleonic syndrome and start overcompensating for everything, remember first off that Rhode Island is a thing. Remember what I said earlier about Wyoming being the 2nd least densely populated state in the Union? Well, Alaska blows it out of the water. Pun intended. Sure, if Alaska were a country, and why in the name of Dick Van Dyke isn't it, it would be the 17th largest nation on the planet. Yet, only 738,000 people actually live there. That's lower than, yep, Rhode Island. It just goes to show you that size isn't everything. That's it for this episode of Lost in the Pond. Remember, if your state did not make the list, please write to your congressman and demand action. Actually, their hands are probably tied on this issue. Just move on. Just move on. Especially you, Rhode Island. You're beautiful as you are. Remember to subscribe to Lost in the Pond right here on YouTube by clicking this Alaska-sized subscription link. And you can also follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Details in the description box below. And as ever, go to lostinthepond.com for further insight into my life as an expat. Until next time, bottom of the morning to you. I just made that phrase up.